You Will Always Be Mine. Let's talk about Five Nights at Freddy's 2.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are back, the Eye of the Storm podcast. So, today we are going to be discussing or debating Five Nights at Freddy's 2. But before we do that, you already know what time it is, movie recommendation time. So, guys, what's the best recent thing that we've seen?
So I watched two things to recommend actually. One is just to kind of touch on. I watched the Diddy documentary. For anyone that hasn't watched it, you should watch it. Spread awareness for pieces of shit like him in this world. Like it really kind of like paints a really bad picture of him. And I think it's probably just as well. Like some say the good die young and like these evil people live forever. And yeah, he's kind of just like another example of that. But yeah, watched it. I think actually a well put together documentary. Actually, I think it like really kind of pieces things together well, tells a good story, and like is in some areas a little bit fair, but in other ways you can kind of, I wouldn't say see the agenda behind it, but you can kind of see like the picture that they were trying to paint of him, which I think is fitting either way. But anyways, that's the whole TV documentary. I think it's on everyone's lips. But the actual thing that I did watch that I will recommend is Companion, and this is one that came out earlier in the year. And I remember kind of Jonathan, you said that it was like a good movie that you'd watched, so it was always like on my mind to kind of get to it at some point in the year. And just Sunday evening having dinner, I was like, okay, cool, time to find a movie, and I was like, oh. Jonathan recommended Companion, so I was like, okay, I'll give it a watch. And for anyone that doesn't know what Companion is, it's about this couple. They go on a retreat. I don't know if it's a spoiler to say that the woman is not human, but the woman is not human. There's like a plot that people kind of scheme up, and it's kind of just like following the events that happened from that. Essentially, it's kind of like the loosest way that I can like say it without like trying to put any spoilers in there as to what happens. And I think overall it's like it's a really kind of fun, enjoyable ride that the movie takes you on. Really enjoyable characters, really sort of kind of like well acted. I think it kind of changes who you root for in different parts of the movie, which I think it does really well. Like it's nothing amazing, nothing like spectacular, but I think it's just like a really good solid watch for if you just need like a Friday night movie or Saturday night movie. It's not going to change your life, but it's just like a really good horror. I wouldn't even say it's like super. It's like a horror movie. I don't know if it's in that class or not, but it's just like a really solid thriller slash horror movie.
I actually forgot about that movie, but not in a bad way. It's actually a really good film. But for me, I didn't even watch much this week. The only thing I can think of to recommend is Pirate Book Force with This Is Tommy's Story. If anyone's not familiar with the whole Power franchise, this is mainly this is not mainly, it is revolving around Tommy Egan and pretty much a drug dealer who tries to rise to the top, literally. But now he tries to rise to the top in Chicago. Before it was New York with his partner Ghost. But obviously, you already know what happened to Ghost if you've seen the Power franchise. I'm not going to spoil it for anyone that hasn't seen it. But yeah, so now he goes off on his own journey. This is currently on season 3. I think this is the final season. So far, so good. I would recommend.
The best thing I watched this week is Joyride. Now, there's at least 4 movies with that title, so I'm talking about the thriller from 2001. The story is essentially these two brothers who are on a road trip, and the car they've rented comes with a trucker radio. And so they start messing with truckers in the area, and they kind of pretend to be this attractive woman who wants to hook up with this one trucker, and that kind of spirals out of control. And when the trucker kind of takes that personally, he starts going after these two brothers, at which point it kind of turns into a slasher movie as they're kind of on the road, and this disembodied voice is kind of taunting them and going after them, and any truck could be the guy, and it kind of spirals out of control from there. The story is not really the most remarkable thing, and the ending is a little bit generic. But in between, you get a lot of tension and like threat and like this ambiguity and this whole thing of you're on the road and you don't know who you might run into, and anything could happen, and it kind of taps into that idea. And I just put it on because it was on Disney Plus, like relatively late one evening, and I didn't even intend to watch the whole thing. I just had an hour to kill, and before I knew it, I was having a good time, and I was finishing the movie and stayed up way too late. So this is kind of like a little bit like how it used to be when you would just find a movie on TV and you would just stay and watch it, even though you didn't plan to. And in the streaming era, that is kind of rare because everything you watch is deliberate. And I kind of got that sensation from this movie because I was expecting literally nothing, and I got just a good time out of it. And it's not the greatest movie ever, and it doesn't need to be. It just needs to be a good time, and it is. and that's why I'm recommending it.
I actually feel like I've seen that movie. A very like I when you mentioned it, I had like loose memories of it. One that I might need to check out again at some point.
And I feel like I watched it like 10 years ago. So pieces of it seemed very familiar. It might be a movie that you might just see if you like turn on TV and it might be on. You know what I mean? It's one of those movies. It's just a competent thriller. And I had a good time with it.
All right, guys, it's time for the main event. Five Nights at Freddy's 2. Danny G, can you please do your thing?
So Five Nights at Freddy's 2 picks up a few years after the events of the first movie. Abby, the younger daughter who was kind of rescued in the first movie, is kind of missing her friends who are inhabiting some of the animatronics, and she's kind of not having a good time at school, and she keeps wanting to go back to her friends that she made at the end of the first movie. And the events kind of spiral out of control where the past, both personal for the characters and as related to the Freddy's franchise, as in the franchise of restaurants, catches up with characters. And before they know, they are embroiled in events that draw them into another adventure with evil animatronics, and the plot unfolds from there. So, what did we think of Five Nights at Freddy's 2?
I'm surprised that it made 110 million in its first weekend. It wasn't a bad movie. It just was meh. That's the best way to describe my experience. I'm just more so shocked that everyone else likes this movie.
Can I just say, I'm a couple of years older than you two, and this is what it feels like to be an out of touch old man.
Yeah.
When you stop understanding what the kids are up to.
Yeah.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah. Like I said, it wasn't a bad movie, but it wasn't great either. It was just it was cool. That's why I'm just still more perplexed at the numbers that it made in the box office. That's why I'm like, bro, I just can't process it. That's what's leave it like kind of annoying me to the point where I'm like, what is this? Did I miss something?
You missed it by about a decade. That's the answer.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really think the movie gives you much to say about it. It was quite forgettable, to be fair. And it's been a few days since I watched it, and trying to like piece together what I saw. I mean, my feeling watching it was kind of a waste of time. You kind of speak on people doing like dumb things in movies, but there's like several things here where I'm just like, that is just not how like it would play out. And we'll get into it in some of the discussions that we have in the spoiler section. But there's just like things happening, and I'm like, why? And it just kind of felt like a lot of the decisions were forced, or like the plot needed something to happen, so this happened to get like this person into this place, or like this person to do this, or to give the audience a bunch of like things to happen because nothing was happening in the movie prior to that point. So we just kind of need to manufacture something to happen. They kind of try to come with like this whole twist which comes out of like nowhere, and you're just like, okay, fair, cool. I didn't really know what to expect because I hadn't watched the first one, but like the whole like animatronics and all of that was fine in a sense. Like kind of like they looked okay, but the way that they were moving, I would just be like, you could quite easily outrun this. Like if you were in any type of danger from this, and I was just a bit confused as to like what was going on. And then they added the whole like ghostly element to it with Charlotte as well, and I'm like, I don't know how like that ties into kind of what's happening in the real world. And I don't know, I was just so confused. And then again, there's like certain dialogue choices or certain like actions that people are taking. You're just like, it doesn't make sense. It's not consistent, or it's just like I'm like really trying to like piece together something to say about this movie. But in all honesty, this is just like such a nothing burger, and this is just the most forgettable thing that you'll probably watch this year. This is just bad, man. It just sucks. But I'll hand over to Dan.
Did you see the first one?
No, and I was like,
That explains it, because the ghosts are explained in the first one.
okay, cool. That's fair. That's fine. And I think then that one's on me. But I saw the reviews for this one, and it didn't motivate me to go watch the first one. Having watched the second one, I then was further unmotivated to go and look at the first movie.
So since we're going in ascending order of age and grumpiness, I will go last. And I did actually watch. I've not played. I think none of us have played the games, and I had not seen the first movie until recently. I watched a couple of days before I saw this one, and I have a feeling I might be the only one. Right, Jonathan? Have you seen the first movie?
Yeah, I have.
Okay, so the movie does not do much explaining. it just assumes you've seen the first movie, which is fair for a sequel. Just having seen the first movie just recently, I thought it pretty much made sense. I did like much of the movie, especially the character stuff in the first 3/4 of the movie. I think the ending falls apart where once the mystery is resolved and all the cards are on the table, there's not a lot to the plot. I do like a lot of the build up. I still think a lot of this is atmosphere and the creepiness of the Freddy's franchise and of the animatronics and how it channels this whole idea of these 80s restaurants, like themed restaurants with the mascots, are a little bit creepy. If you see footage of them today, and if you didn't grow up with these kinds of characters, it's a little bit weird. It's a little bit creepy, and this really leans into that. And I think if you are a fan of the games, you really want to see that atmosphere come through, and it seems like it does, right? I think that part they're really nailed. There's also not much of a narrative in the original games, as far as I know. I've watched some gameplay footage and some summaries, and like it's not very plot heavy. It's basically like you experience an atmosphere and you are kind of trying to piece together a mystery from clues. That's kind of the appeal of the game. And so they had to inject a story, and I think they broadly succeeded. I think the story is fine in terms of Mike and Abby and Vanessa. Like, they're not the most amazing characters ever, but I think they do the job. The family drama and the whole we're trying to move on from these traumatizing experiences. It's a little bit rote, but it's fine. It works. What doesn't so much work is like the actual mystery at the end, where there's just not enough there, and it felt a little bit underdeveloped. Where I just wanted a little bit more to be really engaging, but on the way there, I enjoyed most of the steps. So overall, I think it sounds like I'm the most positive on this one out of all of us, which is maybe going against type. So let's talk about it.
Kind of touching on what you said there at the end about the whole mystery element of the film. Because see, with the first film, it was like a straightforward survival story, whereas this one leans more into the whole detective work. Regarding the new disappearances. Do you feel like this plot thread worked, or they should have gone back to basics?
So this has to expand the mythology, right? Like the first one is a relatively simple mystery about how there was like this mad scientist or mad engineer who kind of created this franchise and used it as a way, like you used the theatrics and the puppets and the animatronics to kind of lure children in and kind of kill them. And now you've got this abandoned pizzeria that's haunted by the spirits of these dead children. And the murderer was never caught and all of that, right? That's a fairly simple story, and I think what they needed to do was expand on that story in the second movie, and I just don't think they expanded it by enough. Like the marionette in the end doesn't do a whole lot; it just wants to get out. Like there's this very plot device kind of thing where there's a magic computer that's seemingly still running after 40 years, and there's just a setting that needs to be changed so that the animatronics can leave, but they need a human to do it. They just need to take the safeties off, and I didn't quite understand why they couldn't do it themselves, because they just needed to coax Abby into doing it. And I didn't quite understand why, and maybe I just missed something. It's entirely possible. But that it seemed to kind of all build up to that. Like everything came down to, can they get Abby to do this? And can Mike and Vanessa stop him? And I think that part was really unsatisfying because it didn't make sense to me. And then once we know what the marionette is and what she's up to, aside from looking creepy, she doesn't do very much. And I think it kind of degenerates kind of into pretty generic stuff in the end, with just, the jump scares and the animatronics rampaging in the town and all of that. Like that part, I think, is the part that was really unsatisfying. And if there was just more of a mystery there, if we maybe, I don't know, found out more about the Efton legacy or whatever, or like the all the messed up stuff they've done over the years on, and I'm not sure what it should have been. It just felt like for much of the movie I was enjoying myself, and it was really fairly effectively building up to something, and then the actual reveal is the thing that kind of underwhelmed me.
I think that's wild. I don't know, like the whole time I was watching it, I kind of felt like it was building up to nothing, to be honest. Maybe it's a caveat on I didn't watch the first movie, so like maybe I just kind of wasn't picking up on anything. But the whole story with, the little girl, is she Abby? Abby's the little girl, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like the whole story with her and like her missing her friends and whatever, and whatever. I don't know. I was just like, it didn't really feel like I was like really going anywhere with it. It just kind of felt like, oh, eventually we're going to see the animatronics, but we're kind of going along in a very uninteresting way about going about this. And again, I think it's because like I'm not invested in what happened in the first movie. If she was part of the first movie and if she was like kind of part of the like initial hauntings that she experienced, which I'm sure she was, but because I wasn't connected to it, I was a bit like, this is quite uninteresting how it's playing out. And then you then add Vanessa's trauma that she's experiencing, and I was like, okay, like, you know, how are we going to link this? And to me, it just didn't quite link well with each other. Like, you know, her narrative, her story about like, you know, what she'd experienced and like the trauma that had happened in the past. And like there was like a moment where she had the opportunity to kind of speak to the brother and be like, oh, like, you know, I think Abby's in danger. But then he kind of just like blows her off in like really weird way, which kind of didn't really make sense to me in the movie. It was one of those like forced conflicts in the dialogue as opposed to it feeling natural in that particular moment. A lot of it was just like really falling flat, like how things were playing out in sort of the opening part of the movie, where I just kind of felt it was a bit directionless in my eyes.
I do think you're missing a few things there. One of them is why is Abby so focused on getting back to these animatronics? And the answer is that Mike takes a job as like a night watchman in this abandoned Freddy's franchise, and then he has to take Abby with him, which puts her in danger. And then they discover that the animatronics are actually haunted by the victims of the serial killer who is still around. And then he becomes the real villain. So initially you think the evil animatronics are the monsters that have to be killed or have to be fought, but no, they're actually victims, as ghosts often are. And it's William Afton, the guy who ran this place, who's the actual serial killer who's still around. And he's still walking around in this mascot suit praying after children, and Abby is the next target. That's kind of the background on that. And she kind of bonds with the spirits of these dead children who are trapped in these animatronics. And that is why she wants to go back to them, because they are her only friends, because she's having a hard time in school.
Stupid question. And I know it's not even like it's not a big part of the movie, but why do these pizzerias have security if they are abandoned and no one goes to them anymore? Why do they need night security? And like, does it at least try to like it's a minor detail and it's inconsequential for the movie. But as you said it, I was like, why?
So I don't know all the details. I think they went bankrupt after these murders happened, and so the company is just paying for somebody to watch it so their stuff doesn't get taken. It's kind of what it is. Like everybody just thinks it's just abandoned, and like I think one thing that maybe quite breaks the story a little bit is that here is it set in modern day? I think so, right? Because the games are set in the 80s, so it's just been a little while. So like since these restaurants closed down, and so that explains why they haven't been sold off yet. And like in the games, I think they can't find a buyer because all these children kept dying, and so nobody wants to buy them, and so they just sit there. And here I'm actually not sure like if this is present day or set in the past. Yeah, it says here 2002, right? So I think the plot hole here is that they're still there after 20 years. That's kind of the weird part. But like the company still exists, and these franchises are just sitting there rusting, and they just need somebody to watch the stuff.
Fair, that makes sense, and I can accept that. I can accept that. I was just like curious as to like, you know, why they were there. I'm actually shocked that this worked for you.
What the part that worked for me was Mike and Abby's relationship, Mike and Vanessa's relationship. I think they're very understated in their performances, and I actually think the actress that plays Abby is terrible. I think she's very clearly just reading lines. But that's kind of what happens when you hire an 11-year-old. And she doesn't have to be very good in the first one because she's just an 11-year-old kid. She will just need to play scared. And then in the second one, she does a lot more character stuff. And now she's 13 or whatever. I haven't checked her age. But sometimes child actors just, every time you deal with child actors, you roll the dice. And I think she quite worked out here. And I think her performance was the weakest part in this, where it felt like she was just saying the lines that she'd been given. Everything else, I think, worked fine. Mike specifically is very understated, very calm, very reserved. But I bought what he was selling, is kind of my thing. And then we've got Mike and Vanessa, where if you've not seen the first movie, you wouldn't know the degree to which Vanessa kind of betrayed their trust and endangered Abby and all of that. And and Mike kind of has a little bit of sympathy for her, but he's kind of running low on patience. And one thing I actually really liked in this movie was when he realizes that Vanessa has once again endangered his sister, he just tells her to get lost. Like, that is not something a lot of movies will do, where especially male characters are often perceived as, if they're the good guys, they're pushovers, right? Who never stand up for themselves. And here, Vanessa is clearly in the wrong, and Mike tells her so. And in order to protect his sister, he tells Vanessa to get lost. That kind of it's just not a thing that most movies would do. It's just what makes sense for Mike in that moment. And I was kind of pleasantly surprised that they did this. In addition to that, I think what kind of Vanessa's thing about trying to deal with the fact that her family is this messed up, I think works. I think it's nothing groundbreaking, but it's not bad, right? It's at slightly above average in terms of they're convincing me of the reality of these characters. And I think that worked quite well, and especially in horror, this can be a little bit contrived, a little bit cardboard cutout, and I don't think it was. One thing I particularly liked was the dream sequence, which I normally have no patience for. But I thought this one was really well done, where Vanessa kind of confronts her memories of her father, and he kind of appears in her dream, and she kind of at first runs away and then confronts him, and she changes appearance every time her state of mind changes. The sequence depicts how she's the scared little girl, and she's the grown-up daughter, and she's the police officer, and these are different personas that exist in her at the same time, and they all come out at the same time in the dream sequence. Like, there's nothing said about this. It's just the way it's shot and how they switch between the portrayal of the character, like between the different personas, kind of fluidly several times, that reflects her psyching herself up to stand up to her serial killer father. And it ends with her in her cop uniform shooting him and standing up to him in the end. There's a very short sequence, like 2 minutes or 3 minutes. And I was just a little bit impressed with how artsy but effective that sequence was. And that's not something I expect out of a movie called Five Nights at Freddy's. If you see what I'm saying, like there's just a lot of little pieces here. Or like another thing that I thought quite worked was like the jerk teacher. I've had teachers who are just that, who just pick on a student for no, like, he had a reason, right? And that what he really cared about was winning this robotics tournament, and Abby's project kept not working, but he was a complete jerk about it, and he also didn't let it go. Like, and he completely lost sight of his job in order to kind of keep picking on the student. And I've known teachers who did that, right? Like, who kind of lost perspective this way and just disliked a student to the point where they just kept pushing and kept picking on them. Even though that was a quite cartoonish performance, I've also met cartoon characters like this in real life. You know what I mean? So there's like a lot of pieces here that kind of worked for me, and none of them that really annoyed me enough. That doesn't mean it's great, but I was on board with the movie while all of that stuff was happening, is what I'm saying.
Just to kind of bring it back to the Mike and Vanessa stuff, because I think that's like one where I took specific issue with. I think it was like specifically the moment where she kind of figured out that Abby had gone back, or Abby's being used by the animatronics at the pizzeria, and she goes to speak to Mike about it, and you can see it from a mile off how the conversation's going to go. You can see from a mile off the trope that they're about to play. For me, the reason I didn't like it was because Mike was so conscious about like Abby's security, and I get like there's like the mistrust there, and like, you know, there was like a bit of broken trust, but it was just a bit like, one, he himself has seen that Abby went back to this pizzeria in the middle of the night, and he wasn't even aware that like she went until he had to go pick her up or whatever. And then two, if she's saying, oh, I think that there's like some type of danger, there's something, you know, going on, you would kind of think, especially someone that has experienced it before, is like, okay, like maybe it's like worth checking out, but he just completely shuts it down, and you're like, I could just see the forced conflict that's been inputted in this particular scenario, and I just hated it, because I hate things that are like so easily telegraphed like that. But I think, you know, from what you said about the mistrust and like, you know, her not being like upfront and stuff like that with him, in the whole, like you could kind of get that vibe of like, you know, he kind of cared, but at the same time, you know, she kind of did him wrong, and you know, he wanted to protect Abby as much as he could. So in other aspects, I can see how like that dynamic worked, even though there wasn't really much like else like kind of going on. I don't know, it wasn't like anything superb there, but I don't know. I think as a whole, like there's just like small things in the movie like that, and I'm sure we'll talk about the kids that were doing the filming that went to the pizzeria, like that whole sequence, I was like, I was just kind of like rolling my eyes, like this is painful to watch how they're executing this. I had that like one point of contention in that relationship between Mike and Vanessa as a whole.
It's definitely not genius, right? Like it could definitely be better. I just think like the basic character places work, where Mike specifically is conflicted between wanting to help Vanessa and not trusting her and resenting her for endangering Abby. These things are all happening at the same time, and they all kind of collide, and he kind of then picks a lane essentially. So I think even though a lot of individual lines and individual beats were kind of predictable, I think they were carried by that kind of internal conflict, I think.
Yeah, fair.
I did enjoy the antagonist. I think for me, her story felt episodic. That's why I didn't have an issue with the way that it was told. Because of course it was a setup for the third film. So that's how I was like, okay, it makes sense why they're not really giving off much. They set the foundation of what her goal was, and I think for me personally, that was done pretty all right. I think just what kind of gravitated me towards to her story was she was just the needed fear factor of the film. Like I don't think if she wasn't in the film, then I don't think this could be considered a horror whatsoever. The positives about this film was her, and it was the ending, just mainly to do with the decision, not how it transpired. There's not a lot, but there is a few moments here where I'm like, okay, I like that, I like this, and I appreciate that.
See, what I think doesn't work at all is the brother, like the secret brother who's trying to continue the work of the father, and he's working as a night watchman, which I guess rhymes a little bit with what Mike was doing, right? But not really. The similarities kind of surface level. But he kind of comes out of nowhere, and I don't think it's established at all that there is a brother, or that like that's somebody. Well, there doesn't seem to be. I think what it needed was like a mystery where it's clear that somebody is continuing the work, and it's not clear who. And then there's hints that Vanessa knows who it is, but she won't say, or something like this. You know what I mean? Like that is the part that I think was missing, so that when it's revealed that Michael not only is the bad guy, but is an Afton and is continuing his father's work. Like, at first, it seems like this is like ancient history, right? Once the father is defeated, it seems like it's over, right? Like there's still ghosts around, but it seems like the threat is over, and now it turns out the threat isn't over. Like it seems to me like that needed to be managed completely differently, so that we have an anticipation and there's a mystery of who is it and what do they want, and and all of that, right? So I think that is the part, and that is one of the things that makes the mystery, like the ending, not very satisfying, because it kind of just happens. And I think that was the part where I kind of just shrugged, and I heard people behind me gasp a little bit, like in the theater, when that came out. And maybe that's a character from the games, I don't know. Like I was in a very young crowd where it seemed to me like most of them were already fans of the franchise, which kind of is what's driving the box office. But as somebody not invested in the games and not knowing the background of the games, I kind of just shrugged when they said, "Yeah, I'm Michael Afton."
I understand what you're saying. I agree with you in terms of like just like the brothers introduction didn't really. That was just one of them ones where it's a cliche thing that we always see. But I think with the ending, I don't think that should correlate with the ending. I think it was more so to do with Mike's decision, which triggered the ending, which maybe had the people gasping. But they were gasping because of course she was possessed at the end. But I think that's what we should concentrate more on as being the after, as in being the cause of Vanessa being triggered, and rather than the brother being kind of like the start of it. I do agree with you. The brother was installation, everything was pretty. Wouldn't say useless, but I was like okay, but just Mike saying leave us alone is, I think that's the important moment and the good moment of why I liked the ending and what triggered the ending, because it was like damn, a devastating moment which led to even a bigger devastating moment of her being possessed.
Is there a connection between Mike's rejection and Vanessa being possessed? Is that why that happens?
Kind of, yeah. Well, I wouldn't say why, but it was an opening. It created an opening because that left her vulnerable.
Is it established that the marionette needs vulnerability or a certain state of mind to possess somebody?
I wouldn't say
Because
vulnerability.
when the ghost hunter was possessed, it just seemed to happen. That did not seem to be a requirement.
But I wouldn't say no. But that vulnerability left her open, and I don't know what that ghost is called, the marionette. Took possession. She took possession through openings, and that's all she needed with Vanessa. So I'm just saying the vulnerability for Vanessa is what left her opening, because usually Vanessa's on guard throughout the film. She's on guard, even when she's in the gym. She's on guard. Like in dreams, she's on guard. So in that very moment when she was left vulnerable, she was left open and she wasn't on guard. And as soon as she wasn't on guard, that's when they took possession of her.
Okay. Yeah, that lines up, but I didn't quite catch the causality. Especially since the possession happens in the after credit scene, if I remember correctly. Anyway,
It happened
so
before the credit scene.
was it in the movie proper?
Yeah. That's how the movie ended.
Oh yeah, that's right. The after credit scene is something else, right? When they discover like
I think
another
there was
franchise,
an after
right?
credit scene.
There's a mid-credit scene where a bunch of people go to another franchise and like to steal stuff, and it's basically revealed who the next villain will be. I switched up those scenes, but yeah, you're right. Vanessa becoming possessed is the end of the actual movie.
I didn't see the credits, the mid credit scene or after credit scene at all. I didn't know. Who?
Yeah,
What's the?
I
Who's
don't.
the
If you
antagonist?
played the games, you know, but
Okay.
I don't know. I think we've talked a little bit about the story itself. I'm just a little bit impressed that they did something this good in this kind of movie, right? Because it's not following from the game, it's not from the source material. They had to inject some drama and some human drama into the whole evil animatronics, creepy atmosphere type of deal in order to actually make it a movie. And they could have done something. They could have half-assed it much more. It's just what I'm saying. Right, just if you're grading on a curve, this could be so much worse, and maybe that is why I'm cutting it a little bit of slack, but just a little bit. I actually do think it does hold up, and do think there's enough likability there and enough character stuff to keep it interesting, at least for me. But this is very much not the kind of movie that had to be this good. It's just what I'm saying, because if you look at other video game adaptations, most of them are terrible, and most of them completely change like the story and the setting and the world and like the core appeal of the thing. And here it seems to preserve that. It's just the story itself that's kind of injected into it, but that I think that connects to the core appeal, which is this whole abandoned, creepy pizzeria and the haunted animatronics and the child victims and the serial killer that preys on children and all of that, right? All the pieces seem to be directly from the source material. And then they thought, okay, how can we arrange these pieces to tell a story that holds together? And I think they succeeded on that level. And I think that's what I want movies like this to do. Like it does not seem like this kind of completely twists or discards what's cool about the games if you're into them, but it also turns it into a proper movie, in my opinion.
I think you're being generous, man. I can hear you when you're saying that it's a movie
It's
broken.
functional. It's not
It's,
amazing. It's not the best thing you've ever seen, but it's
yeah,
functional, and that is more than can be said about a lot of horror movies we see.
I guess, and that is true because we do get a lot of like crap horror movies. But at the same time, I don't think I give it praise, or I wouldn't prop up because it was like less half-assed than something else. Because when especially when it's something like Five Nights at Freddy's, which I think is like a big gaming franchise, and clearly people care about it because of the money it makes at the box office. Even if I think kind of the movies aren't on that, or this movie specifically isn't that great compared to the first, but there's still a level of like fandom and care that people have behind it. And if you're going to adapt it and if you're going to turn it into a story, into a movie, at least kind of like get someone that like also cares about it, and like not just put member berries in there. And this is like the same issue that I had with the Super Mario movie, where the movie's functional, that whatever, but for the majority of it, it was like this is stuff that you've been playing since a child, and like here it is on the big screen, and like it's kind of one big fun thing. And I'm like, no, like you kind of still need to tell a story behind it. And if you're not going to tell a story behind it, then stop wasting my time. I can go play the game, essentially.
See, I don't think it's member berries because there's very clearly recognizable stuff in here, right? Like all the animatronics and character designs are directly out of the game, and the atmosphere seems to be pretty much what it's supposed to be. But I have not played the games. I don't have any nostalgia for any of this. I'm walking into this completely unbiased. I have no opinions about the games. Even now I have no intention of ever playing them because they're not my kind of games. And I still thought it worked for me. So I don't think
You're
this
giving
is
it you're
member
giving it props
berries.
because it's functional for a video game
Mhm.
adaptation. So they're still there.
True.
And I wouldn't say it's like member berries, but you're kind of giving it a pass a little bit because it's a video game adaptation. And I think, you know, the people that are loving it and like, you know, the kids that are going to see it, they're seeing like recognizable stuff in there that they're enjoying from it. And I'm just saying that if you're going to take the leap and, you know, if you don't want me to see it as you're just here to try and make money in a different avenue and you actually, you know, kind of have a story that you want to tell and you actually kind of care about the medium of like storytelling through movies, then put a little bit more effort into it. Like I was like, as someone that like loves Mario from like a kid, and you know, not to like kind of distract from this from to kind of take the conversation away from this movie too much, but I love the game as a kid, and then you kind of get like some BS movie that's just there because clearly, you know, you put Mario in the cinema and like everyone's going to love it and everyone's going to go out and see it, and it's just stuff, and I'm like, oh, you could have done so much better. So I see it differently in the sense of if it's something that people care about, and if it's like a franchise that people love, it's like with Arcane for me, for example, where Arcane you can really tell, and Arcane was actually made by first time writers that wanted to adapt it into a series and clearly cared about the characters and all of that behind it. And League of Legends is also a game that doesn't really have a story behind it, so they kind of had to piece together some of the lore that they have for the characters and actually tell a comprehensive story behind, based on the lore that they have for the characters. And you could tell that there's a certain level of love that was put behind that particular project, which is why I hold it in such high regard, and why it's kind of so beloved. And I just kind of want the same for this, so that you don't get examples like, you know, The Witcher as well, where and this is not The Witcher, because at least in this sense they kind of gave fans of the game an element of what they enjoyed in terms of like the vibes and the atmosphere of it, etc. But at the same time, you're kind of stepping into a new medium in movies, and if you're not going to respect the medium of like, you know, trying to tell a good story, which a lot of like a lot of studios that put out movies anyways kind of half-ass the movies as well. But I'm just like, I don't know, I just want to advocate for better storytelling in movies in general, whether it's video game adaptation, whether it's like movies made from studios, etc. I don't know, I just kind of don't want to give it a pass just because it's a video game adaptation.
Yeah, and I'm the guy who can find a fault with just about every story, and I think this has lots of faults. And I'm still not saying it's good. Like, I'm not saying it's a great movie because of the reasons we've talked about. I'm just saying, as somebody who has no prior attachment to this, the story still worked for me. Just on the basis of who is Mike, who is Vanessa, who is Abby, and what do they want, and what are their experiences. That worked for me. I think in the details, it's quite flawed, and I would like it to be better. Also, things like the Minecraft movie and Mario, like, I've not seen both of them, but just based on what people are saying about it, like, it seems to me like Minecraft you get nothing out of if you don't play the game. It just simply doesn't work as a movie. It only works as a collection of references. And that's the whole appeal, and that was the point, and that's what they successfully pulled off. But it seems to me like if you don't play Minecraft, the Minecraft movie does nothing for you. Similarly, Arcane, if you don't play League of Legends, you can still get a good story and good characters out of this. And this one is kind of in the middle, where it kind of has the right mentality in that it tries. It just is a very mixed outcome, right? I'm not here to say, okay, this is an amazing movie. You gotta watch it. It's definitely nowhere near the best of the year for me. It's not gonna be on my top of the year list in a few weeks. I'm just saying, knowing how movie studios approach video game adaptation and knowing how much they had to add to make the story work, I think it's a decent to good job. And then the devil is in the details, and the ending doesn't quite work out and all of that. That's kind of just my take on it. And to me, this kind of means that the two movies in this franchise are not simply this successful just because of the inbuilt fans. I think if you can't get anything out of this, if you're not already a fan, and you're not just here to see the creepy animatronics come to life on the screen, and you actually want a story and there's nothing there for you, I don't think these two movies would have done quite as well. I don't think, at least not past the first movie. And this is getting quite negative reviews for the second movie, right? Like, if you like, the Rotten Tomatoes of this is not amazing. And I'm just saying, it could have been so much worse, knowing what kind of mentality usually goes into movies like this. And I'm just recognizing the effort, and I want to give props to the effort. And then we have to be honest about how good is the final result really. And I think we've done that. I think we've found plenty of flaws. I just want to point this out, that this is a step in the right direction, especially if we're going to get more video game adaptations in the future, because like comics and novels have been kind of picked clean. I want more Five Nights at Freddy's and less Minecraft.
That's fair. That's fair.
Which is like, I couldn't grade more on a curve if I tried, right? Like, I totally recognize this. I'm just saying I was a little bit impressed with how much better this was than it had to be.
Yeah, that's fair. I personally actually kind of feel like for a movie that is based on like the horror elements and kind of like the jump scares and the creepy vibes and stuff like that, I feel like it was like a mixed bag in this movie as well.
You didn't buy the atmosphere. Like, first of all, the animatronics by themselves are kind of creepy, and then you've got like the abandoned boat ride, and you've got, I think the marionette is really creepy. Like, she doesn't do very much, but just her design is creepy and her mannerisms. There's like the river, and it's full of these little dolls that kind of pull people down.
Worst part because it was so like the marionette. I can agree was actually well designed. I think the animatronics as well, for the most part, look fine. I think the dumb thing is like how slow they're shown to walk in this movie. It's like I could probably run away from this. But the part that annoyed me about the river both times is like the river's not that high and you kind of like falling into some like really murky old water, and especially the kind of crew that first go there, and the guy is just like wading through this water that he can quite easily jump out of, and I'm like, I'm being taken out of like the creepy aspect of the scene, because I'm like, why are you still in this water? Like, is it like, what are you doing in there? And clearly like something's going to come and get them or whatever like that, and it's purposely set up to play out like that. And I'm just like everything about like that whole crew that went there, how the excuse that they had to split up was like, okay, like I don't believe that one guy just decides he's just going to take a random turn. Like, he hasn't been in like abandoned places his whole life. I'm just going to like turn and go down this path and not tell anyone. No one else is going to recognize that this guy's disappeared and wonder where he's gone. And then the girl's going to be like, oh, actually, I'm going to, like, we're meant to be filming something and she's meant to be talking in front of the camera, but actually I'm going to stay here. And the cameraman's like, okay, cool, I'm going to go record and have no one, or have like this random guy speak in the camera, as opposed to the person that's meant to be like the face of the channel and stuff like that. And I'm like, I see what you're trying to do, where you want to split people up and you want to like, set up the scares, but I'm like, you're doing it in such a it's like a really poorly executed way. And I'm like, this kind of sucks. And then you get to the point where guy falls in the water and I'm like, just hop out. Like, honestly, just hop out. But he's like, no. And he's just like there with his like shitty torch that is like starting to like flicker and stop working all of a sudden, because he didn't know that he was going to a haunted place and needed batteries in his torch, or whatever the reason they gave for that. And it was just like, what are we doing? Like, it's just too forced.
I completely agree that the ghost hunters are superfluous, should have been cut, and then they should have found some other reason to wake up the marionette. I agree with that. And I also agree that like, there's a lot of stuff like people are standing in the water a bit too much. Shouldn't they? Like, if I fall into that kind of murky water in an abandoned place, I'm going to get out of there as quickly as I can. And it's the movie's job to kind of make that still exciting and still give a reason for the character to fail, because the script requires it, but good writing or better writing would find a way to make that make sense, right? Totally agree. Like, there's a lot of details here that don't quite work out. I think also a lot of the thing about the music box is quite rushed and quite hand wavy. There's absolutely a bunch of stuff here. I'm just saying they went for a particular atmosphere and they achieved that atmosphere. It's not generic, right? It does not feel generic. It's like I'm the guy who, if I see like scared characters walking down a hallway going, did you hear that? I'm switching off. I'm out of there, because it's so generic, so lazy, right? Like, I don't know, like Insidious movies and Conjuring movies and all of that. Like, I want specificity and I want intentionality. That's what I got from this movie, is just what I'm saying. They had a vision for what this was supposed to look and feel like, and they accomplished that.
Yeah, not for me. Like, honestly, anything outside of the marionette and like her design and her vibes was just one big miss in terms of like the vibe. Like, and I'm like the type of person that I kind of like target audience for, these type of movies where you're meant to make me feel uncomfortable and make me feel creeped out. And I was just like, what are we doing here? I don't know. I think, like you said, about like, what was that noise in the hallway? I think I was like very quickly taken out of any horror element of this movie. And I was just like, okay,
Yeah.
whatever.
I do think that like the mystery is kind of lacking, because a lot of the appeal of the games appears to be that you're getting all of these context clues and messages and environmental design that tells a story that you gradually piece together, and you kind of uncover this atrocity that happened here, where this psychopath kind of preyed on children in this place that is supposed to be happy and innocent and a good time and all of that, and it was the venue for this evil. It seems to me like the movies should lean into that more in future movies, where it's a little bit less about the jump scares and a little bit more about uncovering creepy history. And I don't know if like the next games, like they seem to be going in order where each movie adapts a game essentially. And I don't know what the upcoming games are like, and if it lends itself to that, or if that takes a different turn. But it seems to me like that's the aspect that needed to be stronger on, and a little bit less on fighting the animatronics and them bursting through a wall, or landing on a car roof and trying to grab. Like one of the worst sequences was when seemingly, so Vanessa, I believe, was trying to drive into town to find Abby or something. I think that's it. And one of the animatronics just appears on her car roof, and it wasn't clear to me how it got there. And it just kept reaching through the window, grasping into empty air, and it wasn't making a believable attempt to actually attack her. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's lots of things like this that are not quite there. And I think that is the kind of thing that makes it, I think, fall down. And I think that especially the ending is plagued with. But just briefly, one of the last topics I wanted to bring up is that this is one of the few franchises that seems to really resonate with the kids, right? Because first of all, I was in a theater where I was at least 15 years over the average age. I think there were like one or two parents there, but everybody else was like under 22, guaranteed. We've had a similar thing with Demon Slayer, which is making a stupid amount of money. And I did not like that movie at all. And part of that was that I had not seen, like, it's basically like a mini season of that show that I've not seen. And so I'm kind of jumping into it in the middle and all of that. But one of the things we've been kind of noticing, like if you go into older reviews of ours, pop culture is basically recycling things from the 80s and 90s, right? Like it's your Star Wars, it's your Marvel, it's your Jurassic Park. There's very little stuff for this generation. Minecraft was one of those things that was an unpredictable breakout success, because it, like, millions of people have been playing Minecraft, and it's massively popular with that age group. And so this was a movie that was speaking to them, and it was making references they understood, and it wasn't just something that their parents liked and that companies were telling them to like now. This seems to be one of those things where it's like a really small game that became a massive hit, and it kept making more games, and it just became like, if you go to like lore videos for Five Nights at Freddy's, they've got millions of views. Like, this stuff is huge. And it's translating into movie audiences, and it's translating into box office. This has made $100 million, 110 after the first weekend. That's huge. There's much better movies than this that made much less money. And that's because the kids are turning out for this. If you just care about movies having a future and not just dying out when the last people who are nostalgic for the 80s and 90s die out, and then movies are over, because we've not been building new franchises and new stories. You have to go into the 2000s for things like Hunger Games and Twilight and Harry Potter's 90s. You know what I mean? Like, it's slim pickings after 2010. And if you are like 16 now, like I've been asking for 2 years, if you are 16, what is your story? What is your Star Wars? What, you know what I mean? What is your Harry Potter? And it's a pretty short list. And Five Nights at Freddy's is on that list.
Yeah, I kind of feel like with that is it's the adaptation of something. I've like kind of what you were explaining there, of like, you know, some of the older movies is, you know, things like Jurassic World, Star Wars, etc. Those were like initially movies, etc., and they kind of like hit the zeitgeist, and like, you know, people loved it. Whereas I think everything that's made it big in recent time are things that are like kind of like being adapted from, you know, things that are like really beloved. So, you know, you had like your Minecraft, you have your like your Mario movie, even like Barbie. Like Barbie is, you know, just like,
but Mario is like 80s.
Mario's older. Mario's older, which is fair, and I think that's cross generational in that sense. But I don't know.
Still popular, but it's your parent. Like, if you are 14, Mario is your parents' thing, and you might also like it, but it's not yours.
No, exactly. But I feel like anything that's kind of like for example, if they made a GTA movie, I think, and I don't know whether that's like kids, I kind of
20
like,
years old.
yeah, kind of crosses a little bit. But
I played GTA when I was in 8th grade or 10th grade.
yeah, okay, that's crazy. But I feel like like what this is kind of demonstrating is that you kind of have to meet the kids where they are now, whereas like back in the day, like the kids were in the movie theaters and like were in sort of various other settings, and I feel like it's kind of changed now, and I feel like things like video games and stuff like that are quite popular, and it's like you can kind of get like a hit from it, and I actually believe that's why we're starting to get more video game adaptations. I think that's why like people are taking it a lot more seriously, is because these are things that people like relate to and people like spend the time getting invested in, and this is like, okay, how can we then like translate this and make a story out of it and like have a different medium? And that's why you're going to get things like God of War. That's why you've had like things like Halo and stuff like that come out in recent times.
But also Halo, I played in high school.
Halo, you did.
It's not a
To be
new.
fair,
It's not from this generation.
to be fair, God of War is older as well. God of War's previous.
That's kind of my point. Let me check when this game came out. So the first Five Nights at Freddy's is from 2014. So it's 11 years. It's not something that was popular with the previous generation.
Fallout as well. Fallout's like what was a hit.
Fallout is 90s.
Is Fallout 90s? When did the first Fallout game?
I played that in 7th grade.
I didn't even know that.
Fallout 1 is like 96 or 5.
Fair enough. I didn't even know that.
What I'm just saying is, first of all, this is something that is an organically popular news story, right? It's an adaptation from a game, from a series of games. Marvel has been recycled for 60 years, right? Batman is 100 years old. Superman is 100 years old. Star Wars is over 50. This is 11, and we can debate about where exactly we want to put the cutoff, but I'm just saying this is organically popular with the kids these days. The studios are noticing this and making an adaptation that is true to what people like about this. For the most part, we can argue about the details, but it's like, it's not trash. It's not just member berries. It's not just recognizing a thing. When Minecraft came out, I was a little bit concerned about, is this the future of movies? Is this what it takes to get the kids excited? And I think part of me, it's not a majority part, but it's like a small part, that is kind of relieved that this exists, because this is still very story-based. Like, and I spent an hour today watching an analysis of the story of the first game. This is a story-based game that's popular with the kids, and they are into it because of the story. And it's successful. That means we will get more of it and more like it. And I'm just excited about that part of it. That by itself does not make it a good movie, but it's a good symptom of where movies might be in 10 years from now.
I can agree with that.
Which is not an argument for why you should like this movie or anything like that. I'm just saying, like on a 30,000 foot view for where movies are heading and how maybe the next generation can get on board with movies as an art form, which is one of the big concerns, that they might simply shrug and say, no, I want to watch just TikTok for 10 hours a day. And that's a concern, that long form storytelling might just not happen anymore at some point, because it's just simply in the same way that I do not give a damn about opera. You cannot get me excited about opera. You know what I mean? Like, it's just not my thing. And there's no guarantee that movies will always be around just because they've been around for 100 years. It's actually not that long compared to many other art forms. The events of the last couple of years have kind of made me a little bit concerned that we might be the last generation that likes long-form storytelling, like at scale. There will always be people who will watch old movies and read old novels and whatever, but like, social media seems to have fried people's brains to such a point where they can't even handle it. That's kind of the perception I often have. And I think that is part of why I like that this exists. Like, beyond the actual quality of it, I just like that it exists. Which is a weird, like, I did not expect to say this a week ago. I thought this was like the Popeye and the Bambi horror movie and the Mickey Mouse horror movie a little bit. Like, like a cash-in, like complete trash, just there for the name recognition. And what I got was a real story that is quite flawed in its execution, but it's a real story. And the kids are into it in large numbers, which is a signal to the studios to make more like this. And I'm okay with that. I'm at peace with this. All right, shall we wrap it up?
Last thoughts. I definitely do hear where Daniel's coming from at the end. I do actually agree with that. I do like where, kind of like the domino effect that it could cause, or just like the causal effect. The cause, hoping that the effect will be trying to create more films that, our generation are passionate about. You know what I'm saying? So I do agree with that. Still hasn't changed my opinion about it being, meh. But like I said, it wasn't a bad film. It just wasn't great. Would I watch it again? But strange enough, I will watch the third one when it comes out. Mainly to do with the antagonist. I'm gonna give this one a 5.5 out of 10.
This was like extremely forgettable to me. don't think there was like really much in here between like the characters or the scene setting or the vibes or anything that was kind of like, being sold here. I just kind of wasn't on board with really any of it, to be fair. Outside of like a small few like details on like, like the marionette and, the animatronics and some of the design and stuff like that. Like outside of that, I was just a bit like whatever. And then actually, I would even like when the actual like Freddy's toys or whatever, like the animatronics kind of popped up like the Avengers at the end. I was like, what the, I was like, what the hell? Like it just like nothing was really like built up towards them really appearing or anything like that. I don't know. I think Daniel's right in terms of like the element of the mystery, like the mystery element of the story was just severely lacking, and I think really quite underbaked. And I feel like if they kind of leaned into that a little bit more in this particular movie, then it probably could have been a lot more interesting than what I found it. I like overall I was a bit like, yeah, it's just shoulder shrug is the best I can give it. So for that, I'll give it a 4 out of 10.
As somebody who has no previous connection to the story, I think the characters work well enough. The atmosphere works well enough. And I think those are the two pillars on which this movie rests. I think the story needs tightening up. Specifically, they cut out the extraneous pieces, focus more on unraveling the mystery and kind of discovering what went on in this creepy place. I enjoyed both of the first movies at this point, and I'm definitely going to give the next movie a shot. I hope they tighten up the story, and I hope they take it somewhere interesting, which, from what I've heard, the material is there, and now they need to deliver on that. So for overall, that's a 5 out of 8. I largely enjoyed it, but in the details, there's a lot of mistakes going on that just keep it from being great. That's kind of my bottom line.
All right, guys, thank you very much for tuning into today's episode.
If you reach this part of the episode, as always, we appreciate your support. We appreciate you pressing play. And just in general, we appreciate you rocking with us. And as always, if you liked what you heard today and you enjoyed our discussion, you should probably tell a friend. And if you hated everything and you thought we were chatting a bunch of nonsense, then you should probably tell an enemy. We are the Other Podcast.
All right, guys, we'll catch you next time. Au revoir.
Ciao.
Bye bye.